Hi, my name is Elisha Campbell, and I am the third grade ELA and social studies teacher at Car Creek Elementary. And today I'm going to share with y'all about my merging classroom. So, we all know that we've been dealing with COVID-19 for over a year now within our classrooms. And last year, when we were just abruptly, thrown from our classrooms and pulled into doing virtual and teaching remotely and just pretty much taking on a million different roles, I started thinking about, okay, what's going to happen when we go back into school and we're still doing all these virtual activities, because my classroom is completely driven by collaboration and interactivity and just hands-on and trying to bring all of my reading lessons to life, because as we know, a lot of kids with all of the technology that's in the world, their attention spans are minute, even my own kids at home. And so we have to keep up with the time and have to keep up with a way to keep our students engaged and to keep them excited, and to kind of try to find a way to bring those pages to life when it's much easier to watch a video of a read aloud than to actually pick up a book and read it yourself these days. So those were all the questions that were popping into my head, is what am I going to do to bring my questions to life? And so the answer that kind of kept going around in my head was VR and virtual reality. And so that led me to thinking more about, like I said, the pandemic. And these were my fears. How am I going to make it hands on? How are we going to do all these real world application learnings? How am I going to be able to social distance my kids? Because my classroom is not traditional in any sense of the form or the word. I had flex seating before COVID. I had kids constantly working in partners and pairs and just touching and interacting. And so I was I've pretty much had to try to basically redo and revamp my whole teaching style this year in a way to fit myself and COVID all in the same safety pocket, which has been very difficult, but we've made it. So that led me to my area of focus, which was my question I had. And my question is, how can I provide real world engaging experiences for my students from afar? So whether they were with me or whether they were at home, how was I going to be able to give them that connection to the text? Because to me, that's so important. They're more likely to read something if it has some kind of connection to them, or if they can have something that they can think about and relate it to. And that's always helped my students with their reading goals in the past, but we've had to rethink how we did it this year. So the answer to that, what I found out, is probably one of my most favorite things I've ever received. I've received a lot of things through KDE and their grants, but this is probably one of my top two things. And it is virtual reality. So if you've never heard of Merge and the goggles and the Merge Cube, go right now, stop the video, pause it, whatever you need to do, write it down, make a note, and go and look this up, because it has honestly brought so much enjoyment and so much engagement into my classroom, especially during the pandemic, more so than what I ever thought. Now, the Merge Cubes, these are really cool, and this one's just one of the brand new ones. I've not gotten it out of the box. We've used these some in the classroom, but not as much as the goggles. The goggles are my favorite thing. But what happens is this little cube comes out, and there is an app. And so kids can scan the app onto the cube, and basically it projects for them a 3D virtual image that they can see on their phone. So, if you're talking about a text with dinosaurs, or this with science and social studies has been a game changer, because, a lot of times, especially in the primary, it's really hard for us to find that time to integrate social studies and science into our daily schedules. But this has just made it like so easy. So if we're reading something about dinosaurs, if we're reading about just whatever, I think there was somebody, I think we looked at like different aircrafts, like all kinds of different things. You can just search it up with the apps, and it just projects it. So I don't know if you can see, I'm trying to find a little example. On the box, it kind of actually gives you a little example of how it brings these things to life in that 3D version. So, um, and the apps, they're on there. So that's the Merge Cube, and then you use it with your phone. I think you can use it with an iPad. But the most awesome thing have been these VR goggles. So basically, what I have said is it helps them to interact with the digital world. So our kids are all about the game systems, they're all about the digital. So why not show them 3D, how to be a paleontologist, how to watch a volcano erupt, and how hopefully we didn't get quite there this year, but how that they can create their own virtual objects and that they can hold and that they can share. As STEM projects, that's my next goal. We didn't get to use these to the fullest that I wanted to this year just because we've learned so many things this year about digital, and our students have become so proficient in their own sense with all this technology we've thrown at them, especially for the primary. I mean, our older kids are pretty responsible, but for my third grade to be able to manipulate all these things on their own, like that is a success criteria. Might not have even been on my how I would rate success at the beginning of this project, but it is now. So some of my objectives for this grant was to travel and explore without leaving the classroom. We usually go on probably 2 to 3 field trips a year in third grade. Last year I think we took them to Camp Nathaniel to do a social studies science activity, and we went and watched a play, and we, even just taking them outside somewhere close to home at the lake or the park has just been impossible to do because of the pandemic. And so um, I didn't want them to lose out on experiences or to lose out on things just because it's not their fault. No, it's nobody's fault about a pandemic. So we have to kind of think outside the box. And how are we going to give our students these experiences, even though we can't leave one specific room? And I feel like that we have clearly met that objective because they got to do a lot of travel within my classroom. I think the first day, and I'll talk about it here in a little more, but the first day that they put these on, I just kind of let them play with them, and they got to choose where they wanted to go and what they wanted to see. And especially in, Eastern Kentucky, and a lot of our kids, especially through the pandemic, it's been even harder because, a lot of our parents may work in the fast food chain restaurants, or they may do these other jobs that have gotten shut down. And so they don't have the means to go anywhere or do anything even before the pandemic. Especially during the pandemic, travel's been shut down. So our kids have lost out on a whole year's worth of just life experience and seeing things and learning through, the outside world and interaction. So they got to put these on and they got to go anywhere that they wanted to go in my classroom. I think I've had kids that went to space. I had kids that went to the beach. I had kids that went to the ocean. I even had one student who went and, like, I think saw a reenactment of Revolutionary War, I think. So you talk about bringing history to life. There was no better thing that I could do than him put that on and just see it firsthand. And which leads me to my second objective, which is promoting curiosity and engagement. I used these for one of my formal observations, I think just 2 weeks ago. My kids had used them quite a bit before that observation. And it's very rare, to have all of your students engaged every day or even during a formal. But I have to say, I'm going to brag on them that I didn't have to do anything spectacular because this did it for them. They were curious. They were engaged. We went on a pretty much nighttime scavenger hunt for constellations in the sky that went with our novel Winn-Dixie, and talking about a character's mom who knew all the constellations, and that led us into a discussion about, well, what are constellations? And so I told them, I said, around here you might say Big Dipper, Little Dipper, that's what we know. But we were able to explore many constellations, and they learned so much just by our little 360 VR field trip that we went on with our goggles. So yeah, it allowed my students to go further, and they went and researched on their own about what are these constellations and what do they mean. And all the questions that they were asking, I didn't even have to prompt them to ask anything. They were asking questions themselves, which in turn is, as an educator, what we want our students to be doing anyway, is asking those important higher order thinking questions and becoming their own facilitator and their own person about what do I want to learn, and they're driving their own education. And so in my classroom that day, it was just really nice to see. Which finally puts me to objective number 3, which was increase student interaction by bringing content to life. I mean, yes, like I just said, they have been on all of these virtual field trips and they have seen all these things, and it has helped to make a connection with the text that I never could. We can't, like I said, kids are in here. A lot of our students have never even, been to a beach other than Carfork Beach. They might think that that's a beach. I've had kids say that before. Or they might have not have ever been to a zoo or a museum, things that my own children at home may take for granted. There's a lot of my students who don't even know anything about this. They just have never been. And so for me to give them some type of opportunity to show them these things the best way that I can, especially during the pandemic, I would say that we've met and exceeded all of the expectations and objectives that I had for integrating these things into my classroom. So my resources that I had for this project were, I got 16. So they come in a set. So if you're thinking about buying them, please don't leave the goggles out because they are more expensive, but these are worth their weight in gold. So look, the merge cubes, I think you can get a class set and it's a lot less expensive. But if you get them together as a combo deal, you actually save money because it's $60 for both of them. I think separate it's like 50 and 20. So you're still saving like $10 to $15 as a combination deal because you don't want to leave these out. What happens with these is you put a device down in here. And so kids wear them and it brings it as a 360. So it puts them in something. So when you put the phone in there and have a 360 virtual field trip, that's how they are viewing things. So yes, don't leave out your goggles if you decide you want to purchase VR for your classroom. Now, even though these have been super successful within my classroom, that does not mean that we have not had our challenges. And so I didn't want to not share challenges because as we all know, when we try new things in our classrooms, it all isn't doesn't come out as roses all the time and every time. There are sometimes failures on the road to success, and sometimes we trip and fall, and sometimes it looks like a complete hot mess because it's something new. And always when we try new things in our classroom, it's scary. And so this was scary for me because one, we had a little trouble. So these are things that I'm going to have to think about continuing on in my classroom of how am I going to fix them. Compatibility. So ideally, these would have been amazing had there been some kind of extension or something that my kids could have used a laptop with and interacted with it that way. Because what happened is they have to have a phone or an iPad. Well, I have about 6 iPads in my room, and probably 3 of them are outdated, and so the iOS wouldn't download the apps that we needed to work with MergeCube. So then that led me to trying to get my students to bring in their own devices, which led my parents to, they're already having to bring back and forth every day, laptops and workbooks and all of these things because, when we first got them, about January, February, we were still hitting miss, are we going to be virtual? Are we going to be hybrid? Are we going to be here? Are we going to be there? And so it was just a lot of stuff for a third grader to have to keep up with and have to bring to school every day. And so I would try my best to make sure that I had planned it out ahead of time so that when I knew, which really I'm not a planner, I'm a spontaneous teacher and I like teachable moments. So I really wish that that's my next goal, is if I have enough iPods or, trying to get old phones donated or something that I can revamp myself this summer to have in my classroom so that I can use these things just sporadically and not have to plan so far ahead of time. Because if we're reading something and kids are getting engaged about it, man, I just want to bring those out and just say, hey, well, let's learn this way or let's learn a little bit more. Because to me, I hate planning. I just No, I let my students plan my day, and whatever we're doing, it just kind of goes. We just go with the flow in that way. Integration, like I said, having to plan and having to try to figure out the best time to integrate these into my classroom and how I was going to do it, and not let's just not forget how to sanitize everything. So unfortunately, I have 16 of these, and I was lucky enough to have I had two third grade classes, 10 each, that came back to in-person learning when we went hybrid. And unfortunately, one classroom didn't get to use them as much. I think they got to use them one time because they just, like I said, I didn't have the compatibility means for everybody to have a phone or a device, and they didn't have it from home to bring. But one of my classrooms, I did end up having enough students bring in their own devices with my addition, so that they could pretty much, we checked out a VR set, so they pretty much had their own kit. So I had 16 and 10 in that class, so we just kind of put their name in a box and put it with their stuff, and so I didn't have to sanitize every time we use these. I'll have to sanitize them after the fact. But that was another thing this year, is something we're not used to, trying to make sure everything is sanitized and clean, and trying to make sure that the kids knew how to use these. And one thing that you wouldn't have even thought about is I put these on myself, and I was trying to figure out how to use them at home. And so I get on a roller coaster, a VR roller coaster, and got a little motion sickness, ain't gonna lie, about wearing the VR goggles. So that was a challenge, that after the fact that we went and explored the sky, or I think one day when we went on just choose your own trip day, on Fun Friday, some of my kids went into the ocean, or some of them went on a spacecraft, and they were like, I'm a little sick, Miss Campbell. And I'm like, oh Lord, we've got motion sickness on the VR goggles. So that's another thing to think about. If you have a student who is extremely sensitive to motion sickness, may or may not be a good idea to put them on there for a very long extended period of time. I think my kids were on there 10 to 15 minutes. I would say that's probably max, because it does start to mess with your mind just a little bit. So that's another thing to keep in mind. Measuring success. So, every year that we've always done, if you got a grant for a reading program, or if you got a grant for whatever you got a grant for, it's, oh, how did the students grow, or how did this measure, or what test score did they have, or what was their reading level, or no. So my success was the testimonies on this product for my kids, and then when people come into my classroom, like my administrators, and they would see the engagement within my classroom, that was enough to show that this was a success for me. And so I just wanted my students and their testimonies about it to speak for itself, and how that they felt about me incorporating this into my classroom. And so I have some little interviews I did with a couple of students. And the first little boy, I'm going to tell you, I really wish that I would have captured the first day of them doing the VR on video, because you all would have just cracked up at them. But unfortunately, I was using my phone. I have a student who is kin to me in there, and so I let them use that phone because they didn't have one. Like I said, we've had challenges with this that I got to work on, but I'm going to, because it's worth it. So I didn't get to video them as they were doing it, but guys, y'all, they had them VR goggles on, and people were like, I had a student, this little boy, he was like reaching, he's like, it's right there, it's just right there in front of me. And you could just see them. Some of them were like standing up and walking. And I remember the first time I ever did VR, and it was at KDE. And I think I did the skyscraper walk on the plank or something. And it is so realistic, and you're feeling like you're going to fall off into, you don't want to move because you feel like you're there and you're going to fall off the edge. And so for me to think back to my own experience and think about how my kids were doing on that experience, it was just, I got my cooperating teacher, and she come on, and we just watched them for, a few minutes with those on, because they were all just like, and you'll see a picture of a couple of them, and I'll explain in a minute. But the first little boy, he didn't put this in his interview, but the first day he put these on that we used them in the classroom, he pulled them up. He said, Miss Campbell, this is probably the best thing I've ever done in school. Enough said. He's a quiet little boy. He doesn't really say much, but for him to say that, that was enough testimony for me to know, hey, Miss, you got to use these every year. You got to find a way to make it better and to incorporate them more, because times have changed and kids love these, and it is making learning interactive and relevant for my students. So I'm going to let you watch his video first. So this is Landon, and he is the little boy who said, Hey, Miss Campbell, this is the best thing that I've ever done in school. And I don't know how the audio is if you guys can hear them, but I'll kind of decipher what they're saying.
My name is Landon, and my favorite thing about VR that it is really cool.
So his favorite thing about VR is it's really cool, but he did say that day that this was the best thing he'd ever did in school. This little girl is very energetic, so she is hard to keep up with on um, what we're doing in class. But I will say, through this, I have had 3 parents come and tell me that their child, and this one is included, saved up their birthday or their allowance money because they wanted their own VR goggles to use at home. And so, what more testimony can I have than students wanting to take something that they got at school and take it into their own personal life? I mean, everybody's got to get these. 2.
I like these VR things because it feels like you're in a different world that you never been to.
So if you couldn't hear her, she said, I like these VR things because it feels like you're in a different world that you've never been to. And yeah, that's like I said before, I had one little girl in here and she's actually one of my special ed students, but I didn't get an interview with her. She was absent that day, but she said, Miss Campbell, I've never been to the beach, but I do believe that if I did go, it couldn't be much better than what I'm seeing right now. And so that was actually what she had said. For kids to see that, kids that are never going to, hardly make it out of Knott County or Eastern Kentucky or anywhere for that matter, giving them some type of experience. That's what it's all about as an educator. And finally, last but not least, I think Mr. Evan here, he will say it best.
Hi, my name is Evan Cornett, and these are the merch. I've really enjoyed using them for virtual field trips. I love that. I'm in the classroom for 1 second, and the next, I'm in the ocean.
So he said he loves it. He's in the classroom for 1 second, and then he puts on his goggles and he's in the ocean, and it takes them somewhere else and it makes them feel like they're not just sitting at a desk every single day. And so I just love that he said that. He said it best when he said that. So let me see here. I think that was all that was on there. Okay, this slide right here is the one with, this was from the first day. I did get some pictures of them using it. I just didn't get their video when they put them on. So this little girl right here with the pink pants on, she is the one who said about the beach. She said, I've never been there, but I can imagine if this would be what it is. So it's almost like she actually, oh, let me go back. She actually stood up, and I think she was like swimming at one point. I'm really not sure, but she was like diving down into the ocean is what she was seeing. And then this one right here really cracked me up, the one in the lower right hand corner with the teal shirt on. She has her hands like this. Because she was just like couldn't believe it. You could hear her gasping in the classroom. She was like, "Oh my goodness!" And I don't even remember what she was watching. I think she might have been one that was watching a volcano erupt because we had, or maybe it was even a shark attack or in a shark attack because we had just we adopted Wit and Wisdom this year, and so this VR with Wit and Wisdom and all the rich text that it provides. We've read books about giant squids and sharks attacks and all these, nonfiction texts that get kids' interests and high peaked interest texts. They went and looked this stuff up themselves because they enjoyed it so much. And so she was just like, oh my goodness, it's right there. And then finally this little girl back here, she said, I've always wanted to go to Ireland. I think it was this one we went close to about it was almost St. Patrick's Day or something like that. And she was thinking about Ireland. We talked about Ireland, and so she went there and she's just like, they just couldn't believe it. You could just hear them and how they were talking. I really wish I would have got them on video, but unfortunately we didn't. But we did capture these moments from them. So if you guys haven't heard of Merge Cubes and VR goggles, or if you want to know anything about them or how I've been incorporating them into my classroom, please contact me. That is my email. It's alicia.campbell@not.kyschools.us. If you have used these and you have some tips and tricks to help me with the challenges that I faced when I incorporated them in classroom, please email me. Please hit me up on how you use them so that I can make their experience better next year for my students, or how you found enough devices, or just anything. But anything you want to know, or that I can tell you right now about these, I would gladly do that. I highly, highly, highly recommend that if there are grants next year, that you totally write one for these. They have been a game changer in my classroom. So thank you guys. I hope you enjoyed my presentation on my emerging classroom. Bye.